Welcome to Overthinking in Your Underwear. I'm Lindsay, and this week I'm overthinking remote work and culture post pandemic. I'm actually not sure what I'm going to call this one yet, so you'll see it in the title. So, what I've learned since recording in the last few months is that when I decide to record and when I have on makeup and have actually taken a shower often do not line up. The never the two shall meet. So welcome to this. This is fine. But on this episode, I'm going to talk to my friend Liz, Elizabeth McFadden. She is the owner of Novella Brandhouse, which is a full service ad agency in the crossroads of Kansas City. It's a really great place. And she and I have very different opinions. We're good friends, but we have very different opinions about the theory of remote work or the idea of remote work. As me, someone who is a copywriter, a lifelong copywriter in advertising for like 20 years, I've always said, even before like the concept of remote work came up, which was just 3 years ago, right, guys? Even before it came up, I was always like, why can't we work from home? Why can't we work from a coffee shop? Like, I just need to knock some stuff out this morning and come in at 11 because my job, which was writing copy for advertisements, whether it's a TV commercial or digital banners or websites, like I just need to lock in and focus, right? And a lot of times the office culture that we all know, whether you're an accountant or you're in advertising or people are buzzing by, people are grabbing you for a quick meeting, you feel the pressure to chat around the water cooler. It's not conducive to like really narrowing down and writing a whole thing of website copy. It's not conducive to kind of researching some stuff and then writing copy. It just like, it did not work for me in my job. And I've heard other creative people that, work in advertising say the same thing. Like, I get so much more done at home. So when the pandemic came and we all went home, I was just like, Eureka. Like, this is how advertising people were meant to work. This is like how we were meant to be more productive. This is how it was supposed to be done. And I was so happy that owners could see this. I was so happy that people were starting to say, like, oh my gosh, like, we get it. Like, we're going to let people start to like actually work how they should be. How's more productive, how's better for their mental health, how's actually better for their work productivity. So no one's more like vocal about how remote work is better for us creatively, emotionally, better for their well-being than me, right? So my friend Liz, who is a business owner, has very different goals. And I completely understand those goals. I understand if you're a business owner, you need to train a younger generation. And how do you train a younger generation if they're not sitting next to their senior counterparts, kind of drafting off of them? She's trying to build a culture. How do you build a culture off of Zoom? That's very hard to do. I think people can be more, and I've seen people be more antagonistic off of Zoom. That's the benefit of what is changing is there's a lot of options. And there was only one way to office when I graduated. One way to office. And if you didn't office that way, if it felt smothering to your soul like it did me, you just felt trapped and you felt so confused about why you didn't want to work in this environment. A point I make in a previous blog that I will link in the written version is that going into the office is good for extroverts. It's not good for every personality because your social battery and your productivity battery run on the same charge. So if you're going into the office and you have to extrovert all day long, if you have to talk to this coworker, if you have to go to a status meeting that is completely meaningless, if you have to do all of the things required in an office, your productivity battery is draining the same time your social battery is draining. That's why when you're home as an extrovert, you get so much more done. It's not only the time that you're given back, it's that energy you're given back because all of that energy comes from the same place. And when you're going into the office and you're an introvert, I mean, an extrovert too, but I'm speaking from an introvert's perspective, you get drained really fast and you're spending your energy officing instead of actually jobbing. So I think that's something that people don't necessarily realize. Liz, my friend, who we're going to hear from, is an extrovert. So I don't know if she realizes the energy that it takes, you know? So I want to share this one little allegory that I have. So in my 20s, I ran 30 miles a week. After work and on my lunch break, I'd hit the treadmill or I'd hit the road and reach that number that I had set in my head. One day, a friend invited me to yoga. At this point, I thought yoga was like stretching for women in a quiet room. Translation, yoga is for babies, and I was a runner. Shortly after, I went to that yoga class with my friend, and I realized I was in shape in a whole new way. Yoga was gentler on my body, rewarding, and I enjoyed the class as a hobby rather than a workout. I quit running altogether, and for 15 years, yoga has been a beloved part of my week. It keeps me fit and healthy and mentally in check. So we often think the hardest route is also the best route. It doesn't have to hurt to be worth it. Sometimes we're just running for no reason, and there's a healthier way to live or work. We're going to let Liz from Novella Brandhouse, we're going to let Liz chime in now. Thanks so much for overthinking with me, you guys. Here we go. Wait, do I want to wear glasses? I don't know. I'll wear them.
You look cute with or without. Okay, that's going to be
weird. Okay,
I've got like a weird shadow. Okay, I need to sit here. Okay.
No, you're good. Do you have a hard stop because you have another meeting, right?
Yeah,
I just don't want. I want to be respectful.
Yes, let me. I have to go and give a presentation
because I can be long-winded sometimes when this things happen.
So,
I'm drinking a smoothie, so I hope that there's a bunch of like seeds in my teeth the whole time that we're talking.
Well, I just finished a smoothie.
Good.
So let's.
It can be a common theme. Right. So I already introed you at the beginning of this. So this is Elizabeth McFadden, the woman, the myth, the legend, the owner of Novella Brandhouse, located in the crossroads of Kansas City, Missouri, home to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. So today we are talking about how work has shifted over the past 3 years, and it's kind of changed a lot, I feel like, over the last 3 years. And the challenges, I think you and I must have really different opinions about it. Like coming from a position of a business owner and someone who has to train people, who has to wrangle everyone together, who has paychecks to pay, you must have such a different perspective about the whole shift to work from home, to what that means about your culture than what I do as a person who freelances, and who in general just takes projects from companies. I'm thrilled about the work from home state and how the shift has happened. How do you feel about first of all, what do you think has changed just since the pandemic in the last 3 years? What have you noticed?
I mean, there are a lot of things that I've noticed about what people expect from their work, and, working and where they work and how they work and all the things. Obviously people have been wanting a work-life balance, and they've been trying to get that for a long time. And I mean, and you and I as Gen Xers, I mean, when we started our careers, there was no balance. I mean, you worked your tail off, but it's different now. I mean, people that are coming out of college and Gen Z and even young millennials have a much different view of that. And I think that's good. I mean, I think we probably worked too much, but there needs to be a balance. So I feel like people went through the pandemic, and I experienced this too. All of a sudden when all these things go away, you realize what's important to you, what's not important to you, where you want to spend your time. I feel like that's key. Right. And so people have since sort of post-pandemic become more intentional with their time. In fact, I always pick a word every year. I don't know if you do that. I pick a word every year, and my word for 2022 was intentional, which is so cheesy. I feel like intentional, everybody chooses that word, but to me, it meant just being intentional with my time and saying no to things that I didn't need to say yes to, is probably the short answer to that. So going back to your question, people just became much more intentional about, how they spent their time and what they valued. And that bled over into work, which I don't think is a bad thing. If you are doing a job that you don't like, you don't get any joy from it, and maybe you don't get joy from your job, but there's a reason you're doing it. Okay. Again, you're being intentional about that. That's one thing. But if you're in a job or working with people that doesn't bring you joy, then why are you still doing it? And I think people really sort of looked at that. But at the end of the day, it's a job. Okay. As my mother says, there's a reason they call it work. It is a job. So typically, whether you're a freelancer, whether you are a salaried employee, an hourly employee, whatever, if you're being paid to do something, there's a certain thing that's required. It's like, okay, you do this and I pay you for that. Right. And when you are an employee, not only is it, you do X and I pay you Y, but there's also other things that go along with that, other expectations. You're expected to show up, you're expected to do, maybe to be part of the culture or whatever. And all of a sudden after the pandemic, employees and people in general just started saying, well, I know that you say that, and that is a part of the job, but here's what works for me.
Yeah.
And so it became very employee focused. And I don't want to come off, and I'm not meaning to come off as like somebody that, is not, that it's all like company driven or boss driven. It's not. But there's, again, a balance. And a job, somebody is paying you to do something, so if you like, there's that expectation there. And I think it just got where it was hard for companies to really ask
lot of their to do anything.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you my favorite quote about work. It's from Mad Men. And I feel like maybe I've told you this before. Peggy is really upset that Don Draper is not respecting her, or not. He's not thanking her enough. He's not like just going above and beyond to thank her or whatever. And she's there working like really late at night, and he's there working really late at night. And she walks in just ready to give it to him. And she's in a huff, and she says something about like, but you never say thank you. And he says, that's what the paycheck is for. And I laughed my ass off because I felt like Peggy so many times. But then when Dawn said that, I was like, that's what the paycheck is for. I mean, you don't have to say thank you. I mean, this is a business. This is an exchange of goods,
Yes. Exchange of goods is perfect. And oh my God, I love Mad Men. Love that show. I even kind of miss it, but I remember that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I mean, here's the thing. You should always say thank you.
Sure.
But if you don't, or you forget, or you're too busy, whatever, at the end of the day, the paycheck.
At the end of the day, that's what the paycheck is for.
That's the thank you. Yeah.
And going back to what you were saying is like people through the pandemic, I think they became more intentional about their time and all of this. But I think also people also just realized that, wait, we can work like this, because I think I went through my career going like, kind of, I don't even know, like people really never let you work from home. I'm a copywriter, advertising. Elizabeth obviously owns an advertising agency. So we're talking about advertising here. And people kind of would maybe say, oh, I guess you could work from home in the morning, but it was like be in by 10 o'clock. It really just never was never a thing. So I think when the pandemic came and it was like, we can do this, you guys. Like, we actually don't need to be face to face. Everything can be done on our computers. We're Zooming here, we're Zooming there. I'm working better. I'm more effective. I have more creative energy. My output is better. I think there was also this realization of, oh my God, you guys, we've been duped. Like, we've been duped by the 9-to-5 system. Like, this can be done from my couch with my dog. This can be done from a coffee shop, then going for a walk. Like, the cubicle isn't the only way to do it. And I think people realized that too. And then to tell everyone, well, you have to come back into the office and do it this way. It's like, but we already know the secret's already out.
That's true.
Do you think that?
I mean, that is true to a certain degree, but I also think there's a reason why it wasn't done like that until we absolutely had to for the sake of health, right? Like health and safety and community. So
talk a little bit about that. Why do you think the way to be that what is so beneficial about being in the office? And I know that there are reasons. I could give you some of my own, but what do you think are all those benefits for being in the office?
So, yes, are there some jobs out there that, you might work as part of a team or something, but you're really pretty siloed, and you could do it and it is done from anywhere and it doesn't really matter. And you're like a cog in a wheel. But at least for us here, and I think for probably most companies, there is a team aspect and people depend on each other and people need to work together and people need to collaborate. And so, and we that's where we fall. So obviously when COVID happened, everything shut down and we went home for, it was like 8 or 10 weeks, something like that, because literally the city was shut down. We could not come into the office. And as soon as they opened it back up, I asked the team, I said, do you guys feel comfortable going back in? What would that look like? And they were like, yes, we want to go back in. But this was like very beginning of like going back. So, there was no vaccine yet or anything like that. So we had to be really careful. So basically we came back and we were in the office 3 days a week. And we've actually since kept that. So now we have we have a structured hybrid system or schedule. But we did that because everybody missed being together. They, brainstorming and collaborating and working on Zoom is exhausting. And there were just times where we felt like, oh my gosh, if we were just in the same room together, this would come together so much faster. Or, it's awkward sometimes to be brainstorming over Zoom. Or there's times where you're physically together, you're ideating, you're like talking about different things, and somebody will say like, well, okay, I'm not sure, and it's like in person, you can kind of do that. And you can like show by your body language that you've got this idea, but you're not sure. You're going to just sort of put it out there a little bit. Right. And you and I have worked together and stuff like that, where we have been there where somebody did that. And it was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's not going to happen on Zoom. They'll put it in the chat or, they might say something, but it's just different when you feel safe with each other and you feel comfortable with your team and trust. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Trust. When you trust people and you're in the same room together, you can be vulnerable. And it's harder to do that on Zoom. People can hide or whatever. So, so for us, that was really important. And then as time went on, we realized that, doing a structured hybrid schedule was kind of the best of both worlds. Like to your point, it gave people the flexibility to 2 days a week, work from where they wanted to, work kind of more the schedule they wanted, or like work, take a walk, work, sit with your dog, whatever that looked like.
Right.
For you, and just to have more quiet time to work. But the days that we're here are much more collaborative. We're working together. And a lot of times ideas and things just come up because we're just kind of talking and something happens. But the thing that I think a big thing about culture, kind of getting back a little bit to like culture and remote work and all that. So a really important aspect to culture or a team or a company, people working together is trust. And when I first kind of heard about this idea or thought about it, I thought, well, what does that mean in the workplace? And basically everything kind of, builds from that. If you trust your team and the people that you work with, then you know that you can depend on them. You know that you can be vulnerable with them. You know that there might be a conflict, but we're going to work it out, or we're going to, whatever. You just trust your team and you trust the people that you work with. And that makes you feel more secure. And it's like, it's a good place. We want to be in a place and with people that we trust. The number one thing that kills creativity is anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of, I wrote this down, Dr. Martha Beck?
I don't think so.
Okay. She is an author. I actually heard her speak at a conference this week, and she was talking about that. And she's like, it is scientifically proven that anxiety kills creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, I have seen that. And so again, going back to, I think it's when you're remotely working, I'm not saying that you can't trust your team or people that you work with, but there can be kind of a lot of mistrust that starts to breed, right? And you also just don't establish relationships with people like you do when you're in person. And so again, if you trust people, then you tend to have less anxiety and, kind of all those things that I mentioned. And in our world, we have to be creative. So, the less anxiety, the better. And I think that just goes back to creating a culture post-pandemic, or in remote work. I think most companies these days have some element of remote work, whether it's 1 day a week or, 3 days a week or whatever. And so companies have to learn the balance between, what does that look like? Giving people sort of that freedom to work that way if they want to, but also creating structure so that a good culture can be created.
Yeah. Okay. I'm probably going to always be like pushing back on your points because I think we're on other sides of this subject, but I love you and respect you. So I will say, like, I've had numerous positions like this where I had trouble being creative because the anxiety I was under in the office. Like, I was under so much pressure and I couldn't get a minute between meetings and everyone coming by my desk. And I didn't have a minute to think. And sometimes I'd get into the office really early just to try to get an hour to work. And I literally was just kind of like, when am I supposed to do the work? Because I have a meeting and then we're going to see the client. And it was not manageable or doable from that perspective. And now working from home, and obviously I'm a freelancer, but even having pretty consistent projects, it's like you have so much more time when you take out a commute, when you take out getting ready, when you take out all of the kind of office politics and whatnot. Like, there's so much more time to be creative, which lowers my anxiety. Is my counterpoint to that. And I do want to ask you a little bit about office culture in a minute. I feel like there was something else I was going to say when you were talking. Oh, but the thing that I really sympathize with young people and with you is I came out of college knowing literally nothing, literally less than nothing. I worked at an ad agency right away, but at BBDO actually, but I was like making copies and answering phones and I couldn't even answer the phone. I didn't even know how to work the phone. There was too many buttons. I was like, I can't even do this.
My first day at Valentine Radford, I broke the fax machine.
Oh, fax machines are the worst.
So it happened. I mean, you do.
Yes.
You come out of college not really knowing how to work in an office or
I do nothing. It's like, this isn't even the job I want. I want to move up, but I can't even do this job. I was so like demoralized. When I finally did get a, junior copywriting position, I was scared to death to speak in the room. I had such imposter syndrome, had such low self-esteem about it all. And it took me, years of sitting next to a creative director or an older creative and really just like learning the ropes. So I have so much sympathy for people coming out of college and being like, well, how do you learn in a remote environment? Because so much of that is just osmosis of sitting next to someone smarter than you. And you who's trying to figure out how do you train young people, you're hiring new people, you're hiring young people. You can't just let them sit at home and be like, how to do this job, right? Because of course they don't.
Right. Well, and to your earlier point, what I think is awesome now is that people have choices. So if you want something that is 100% remote and you think that's going to serve you best, there are jobs out there.
Mm-hmm.
But and go get those jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had people, and I've heard other companies talk about this, where a job is posted and it's clear that, it's partly remote or it's structured hybrid or whatever the situation is, right? But it's not 100% remote. And people think, well,
It's negotiable.
And if it's clearly stated, it probably isn't.
Right.
That's okay. So, gosh, if anybody's listening today and you take one thing away from this podcast, take away that. No.
Yes.
But that's what I think is cool about where we are right now, right? And kind of like our work culture. If that is what you want and you work best in that, that is awesome that you know that about yourself. And there are jobs that will let you do that. But I think for most people, they like some sort of mix. And especially like you said, if you're younger, if this is your first job out of school, it's probably not ideal to get a 100% remote job.
Right.
You learn, and even in the first few years, I'd say the first 5 years of your career, you learn so much from just watching the other people around you and soaking that in. Yes. I don't care what your field is. You learn by watching other people and people that are more senior than you and picking up on all those little things. So that's really invaluable. And again, that's hard to learn remote, 100% remote.
Yeah. Since I do freelance, I talk to so many different people at different ad agencies. And the thing, I think your structure is great. I really do. But I've talked to so many different agencies that are, we go in only on Wednesdays or pick a day and go in and all these things. And what I hear from some people is like, they go in on Thursday and there's no one else there. And so then they're just Zooming the same people, but they're all home. And then they go home the next day and all those, like a few other people are in the office. Yeah. And they haven't, I think the kinks are still definitely being worked out 3 years after the pandemic. People don't know, business owners like you, people, employees like me, like we don't really know the dance yet. Like, what is this we're doing?
Yeah. That's why ours is, we call it structured. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everybody is in the office. And the whole thing is like, you're here together. Otherwise, yeah, you're right. Does it make sense that if some people are here or not? I mean, but again, I think you've got to kind of know yourself, know where you are in your career and what works best for you and seek that out.
I want to talk to you about work culture and how you create work culture in this new environment. But first of all, I want to talk about you and I, and we're Gen Zs and we came up in a very different time.
Gen X.
Right. Look how young we are.
I know.
We're barely 20. Barely. Okay. We're Gen X. And so we came up, early 2000s, we were, getting into the workforce, and it was so different. And I read an article in Forbes talking about how it used to be perk culture. Like perk culture was the thing. And I was like, oh, I love that phrase because it's so true. Like hiring relied heavily on perk culture, like having a hangout culture, which was sort of like the Google model. We're going to have this cool campus. There's bars, there's yoga classes. You never want to go home. There's like not a line between working and home life. And in other places, especially ad agencies, because, we all want to be Google, we all want to be tech, tried to replicate that. They wanted to be like work is a cool place kind of vibe. And definitely in my 20s and 30s, that's what it was. There was a pool table, there was a foosball table, there was beer on tap, there was, the beer cart going around. They definitely wanted to erase that line, and they were pretty successful at it. Like you were saying earlier, we worked a lot because they were trying to do that whole culture of perk culture, hangout culture, You are just hanging out with your friends at work and loving every second of it. And I think Gen Z came out and they've come up and they're like, are you guys crazy? Work is work. Life is life. Life is me over here taking an Instagram shot of me at the top of, a mountain hiking. And then that is work where I get my paychecks. They're two very different things. And I don't know why you guys ever confused it. Like, don't you feel like it just all of a sudden we were like, okay, that's not what we're doing anymore. Sorry that we offered you a beer on tap. Like, I feel like it changed a lot.
Yes. So, and there are still those things, but they're there for different reasons.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I mean, but I also remember, and again, maybe you and I both came up in ad agencies, which is a very different kind of a world. Okay. It's not corporate, even though it might be corporate, but it's not corporate because, we're too cool for that. Or
they're trying to hide it for sure.
Yes. Ad agencies are, they're this like creative, we have fun, and we do, but there was this whole, like, you went to work and you like hung out together at work, and you went to lunch together and you hung out after work and you worked late together. And I mean, there was this whole social thing. And you're right. At some point that changed, and then it changed, how long people wanted to spend at work, right? It was like, there's my work life and then there's my home life, or my, things they do, in my spare time. And again, it goes back to the millennials. They were like, F that, what the Gen Xers and the boomers have been doing, like, we want a serious work-life balance, and so good for them, good on them, because I do think we needed things to kind of swing the other way. So, but what I see now companies doing is, there are still some of those things there. And I do think there probably are some places that they expect a lot. So they're going to like give you these perks, and it's a trade-off. And if that's okay with you, that's great. If not, then you probably need to work someplace else. But I think most companies use those perks now as a way to create like a social, almost like a social scene at work. So right. Do you see what I'm saying? It's different. Sure. There's a different goal there in mind. Again, you want people
to be friends. You're less likely to leave a company of your friends.
Right?
Don't you? Is that what you're thinking?
I think so, but I also think you don't want to let your friends down. Mm-mm. So you're more likely to do a good job, to be accountable, to, again, trust each other, right? I mean, if it's my work friends, I don't want to let them down. I want to do my part so that they can do their part, so we can make our deadline or finish this project, or whatever the case may be.
Yes.
And so, like, some of the things that we have done, and this is what I find as a boss, as a business owner, that we have to be even more intentional about around our culture coming out of the pandemic, because we're not here in this office 40 hours a week together. The time that we are together has to be, one, it has to be productive. People have to feel like they can get their work done, but it also has to be a time when we're together that we're kind of building relationships in person. Mm-hmm. And yes, you can build relationships virtually, but it's a different kind of time spent together. And so, like, for instance, we do a happy hour on Thursday here at the Brandhouse from 4 to 5 every other Thursday. And we just we just sit on the couches, we just hang out, but it's just a chance for us to honestly get to know each other more and to talk. Right. And like, things come up in those happy hours because we really try not to talk about work. I mean, we might kind of veer that way, but then we get more back into just like personal things or whatever. And I love it. I think we get to know each other just as people. We just like kind of further our like friend relationships. And so, it just makes you understand people more. And again, just have a more clear relationship. So, and then people also want to come to a place that feels good to work in. So I think some of those perks before that were around, like, we're cool, we have this cool office, or work in a cool place.
Yeah.
It might kind of still be that, but now it's more focused on, making a really good and inviting environment for people. So for here, for instance, we have like really, like, it's just a cool space and tons of natural light. Like that honestly is like the number one thing on my list is natural light, because that feels good.
Your space is like cool, is way cooler than my apartment. I think I'd rather sit at your space than my apartment.
Well, it's just, again, like, create an environment that people want to come to, that it feels good to work in.
Yes.
Okay. Not just because it's cool, but it feels good. There's something really warm and inviting about it. And, I think that's been the switch in like these perks, that companies have. It's for different reasons now, but I feel like better reasons, and reasons that really, kind of mean something to people.
Yeah. I mean, this is an overused word, but like more authentic, genuine reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Ideally for you, okay, two-part question. Ideally for you as Elizabeth, what's an ideal work situation for you? Is it coming in every day? And then Elizabeth, the business owner, what's an ideal situation?
So definitely not coming in every day. I think back to pre-pandemic, and I think that was hard. And again, I mean, my kids are older now, but they're teenagers, but when they were little, I was constantly running, running here, running there. Like if somebody got sick, I'd have to go pick them up, or like running to the doctor, like all those kinds of things, like life things. There would be days where, it would be just a lot to try to manage and be at the office and, whatever. Whereas now, I have Mondays and Fridays that I have a lot more flexibility. And so I try to do those things then, or what have you. So I actually feel like the Elizabeth, the boss, and Elizabeth, the employee, are kind of the same, because,
well, that's good.
Yes, because it doesn't matter to me that people are not here 5 days a week, but it does matter to me that, like we've said, 3 days a week are going to be the days that we're here together. And so that matters. And I feel like, and kind of going back to one thing about culture is alignment. People that work for you or with you have to be in alignment. And so, if you work here, part of, and collaboration is one of our 3 values. And so we feel really strongly that, we're better together. And part of our collaboration and being really collaborative is that we all work together in person 3 days a week, the same 3 days, right? So if you don't align with that, then this is probably not the right place for you.
I'm never going to be able to get a job with you, am I? Because of how vocal I am about I love of remote work.
But again, I feel like, again, see, you have found, remote work really speaks to you, and that is what works well for you.
Yeah.
But, you sort of have this itch of like loving to come in and collaborate sometimes.
I do.
Yes.
Oh, I do. I love it.
So you do that on your projects, right? But that's what people need to find. And that's kind of what, again, you need to know. I think companies, they need to be really clear on what their culture is and own that. Okay. Don't be afraid. Don't be, and a lot of companies are going through this because they struggle with,
yes,
people want this or that. Well, you know what? That's great. But be who you are, be what works for your brand, your company, your office, whatever. Right. And also, one of my friends who is she's a psychologist, and she works with companies like on their work culture. And one of the things that she always talks about is, you have to define how work gets done at your company or on your team, right? Like if you're a really huge company, there could be different teams, but you need to define how work gets done. And then that starts to define what your culture is. And so at the end of the day, you need to know it, you need to own it, and not be afraid that somebody might not like it. That's all right. You know what? Your culture is not going to be the best fit for everybody.
Right.
But that's all right, because it's going to be a great fit for some people, and those are the people that you need.
You were saying that you feel like companies are like a little bit afraid to be like, here's our hard line and you stand with us or you need to find somewhere else or blah, blah, blah. Do you feel like employees or hiring candidates have more power right now since the pandemic? Because it wouldn't feel like that considering there's like so many layoffs. It would feel like companies could draw a hard line in the sand and say, this is where we are. They shouldn't be afraid to say what their culture is and demand it. What is your thought on that?
I don't think so. I feel like there are enough people out there looking for a job or open to a job.
Yeah.
And it's not just the schedule, just like it's not just the money. You know, it's a lot of different things for people when they consider taking a job. And so again, you just have to be really comfortable with, you know, where your brand is, where your company is, and what your culture is, because you don't want somebody that isn't really aligned, like we've talked about. I think the other thing is, and I mean, I just had this not that long ago. So we were interviewing for a position, and like I said earlier, you know, people kind of thinking they're going to negotiate something. So, you know, towards the end, well, we were in the negotiation at this point. And this person, I could tell, really did not align with the fact of, you know, you are here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so I just finally said, I mean, this person was a great candidate, fantastic, right? But I just knew that was going to be a problem.
It was me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So I just know it was not. No. So I just knew that was going to be an issue, right? And I thought, you know, that's okay. This person isn't the right fit. And so I said that, and I walked away from that. And a few weeks later, we hired somebody else that was a great fit. So, I mean, you know, it's all right, but you have to, you can't be afraid of that.
Right. I wrote in a blog once about kind of what you're talking about from the employee's perspective, that when you're looking for a job, you should write out your list. Like, I'm looking for salary, environment. I love my boss. I love the creative. You know, how many days a week I go into the office, blah, 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 and then start like arranging them in order. So then you know kind of what your absolutes are. And you're like, okay, well, that salary is really great. Well, I know salary is number one, so I'm willing to go into the office because they're paying me enough money to. That wouldn't be me. My absolutes.
Your love language is not that. It is remote work.
Right. My love language is sitting with my dog. Okay.
Right.
I just drew a dog on the paper and like put a heart around it. But yeah, I mean, you need to figure out what your absolutes are, because then if you're like choosing a job by your absolute, when something gets hard, you're going to go, well, you know what? I love this creative work and I'm doing it all for the creative work. And if you kind of organize things by that, it'll help you kind of find your fit better. So.
Yeah. And because a company culture, because now a key part of that is how they work. Whereas it wasn't before.
It wasn't.
It wasn't. But now it is. And so brands and companies, again, need to really understand and know their culture, and know kind of, they need to also make a list. I like that. I like, you know, just as the interviewee or an employee needs to have their list, employers need to have their list. And I will tell you, you know, over the last year or so, when we've been hiring people or what have you, I know what works and what doesn't in terms of what will fit with our culture and what doesn't. And so we do have that list of absolutes, but then that, you know, people don't want to come in for a culture and then realize, well, it's not really the culture, or it's like, you know, it kind of changes with the wind, you know. I mean, people again, they find their security in a work culture. They're there for that. Maybe it motivates them. They get something out of that. And so just like a brand, you have to stand behind your brand. You really have to stand behind your culture. And so that's why you hear so many different, business coaches or business, consultants or what have you, talking about how important it is to, not only create a culture, but manage that culture. And you can't just like, okay, here's what our culture is and sort of set it and forget it. You constantly have to be, sort of nurturing that culture. Right.
Right. Yeah. So we touched on this a little bit. How was work culture? I mean, we did this a little bit, but we'll just see if there's anything more there. How was work culture different for you 20 years ago than it is now? Like when you were coming up, like what was different?
Well, one of the things I don't know why I think about this a lot, but I remember in my very first job, I worked at Valentine Radford, and it was super strict. Like you were there. I mean, this is a huge ad agency. Okay. You were
Did
there.
you have to dress? Were you wearing corporate dress?
No, like you could wear jeans.
You could wear jeans.
Yeah. I mean, if you were going to visit a client, you had to like dress up, but I mean, you weren't wearing a suit or anything like that. I mean, because we're an ad agency, we're fun.
Just checking.
Just check. No. But you had to be there at 8:30. You could not leave before 5:15. Mm-hmm. And I remember one time I had to go pick up my friend at the airport, and it wasn't that far, right? Because I worked downtown. The airport's like, 20 minutes away or something. And so I remember thinking, well, I'll just skip lunch and I won't take my break or whatever. And then I'll go pick her up. And I just literally had to go pick her up, drop her off at a hotel. Like that was downtown. It was like right by my office, and then come back. I mean, I wasn't even going to be gone like an hour. Mm-hmm. And I got in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I skipped lunch, but I had to go pick her up in like the afternoon or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
That's an example, right. Of like how the culture did not allow for flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much. Yeah, there was always like an eyes on you kind of thing. Like I saw you leave before, like in New York, it was kind of like 6:00 last night. I mean, people in New York always, there was like this, how late did you stay was a badge of honor. I mean, you've heard people say that before, which was so stupid because people aren't even doing anything. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Such a waste of time. But, it would be like, well, we saw you leave before 6 last night. And it was like, because I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm not going to sit here and like shop online at Nordstrom when I don't have any money. I mean, it was always, I mean, they were watching the clock and they were watching your seat. And it was just like, okay, great. We're in high school still. Actually, I think I had more freedom in high school. No one was watching me that much in high school. It was horrible. It was really horrible.
Yeah. So, that is... again, I don't know why I think about that from time to time. I mean, it was like a million years ago, but I think about how absurd that was. And, whereas now that wouldn't even be a thing. Somebody'd say, hey, I need to go pick up my friend. But I'll be back, whatever. And it's like, okay.
Something I was reading when I was doing a little studying for this was like women enjoy working from home more, which isn't terribly surprising because they probably have more responsibility. They probably have more responsibilities at home. So they can they have to juggle all of it. It helps them with the juggling. There's another part of it that I read in something interesting. I know I've told you about once, which is women's housework at the office, which you're a community of women at your office. So I don't know who this would fall on. But in lots of offices, and I have been in this situation when there's a lot of males, and for some reason, sometimes it was explicitly said, and sometimes it was just the nature of women. The women are picking up, the women are planning the parties, the women are, buying the baby shower gift, the women are organizing the winter party, the women are doing all of this. And the amount, it was taxing, like very taxing. And I think the working from home, it just frees you from that because you're like, what? I'm not picking up your stuff or planning your party. What are you talking about? I'm sitting here doing my thing, and there's not any of that additional stuff that's just naturally, you put upon yourself or is put upon you?
In this discussion with my husband the other night, because he is in commercial real estate, which, I mean, a lot more women are going into that industry, but it's been male dominated, and he was saying that he was at a conference and he was speaking to a woman who was telling him about kind of a similar story, like what we were just talking about. And like some guy in a meeting, like just said something to her that was, you wouldn't say it to a man. Okay. And she was offended. And she said, but I didn't even, she's like, oh, I just laughed it off because oh my God, I didn't even know what to say to him. It was so ridiculous. And he's like, I can't believe that. And I said, well, I can believe it because that does happen. Mm-hmm. And I think women, you just tend to, sort of like what's sad is we're used to it.
Right.
Now, I will say, again, kind of going back to work culture and all of that, that is becoming less and less.
I agree.
Right.
I definitely agree.
Right. But it does still exist. Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, that's also something that you have to be intentional about. And this really goes to part of culture that is so important is the expectations of how people treat each other. I feel like a lot of our discussion today has been around kind of employer, employee, and stuff like that. But there really is a lot of onus on people that are a part of the culture. So the employees or the team members and things like that. And like, what are those expectations of how you treat each other? Mm-hmm. And again, maybe it's coming out of the pandemic and people are just, they're not taking as much BS, or again, they're being more intentional about things, or they're just more work-life balance. Like, I do think we've all kind of moved to a better place in a lot of ways. But that also means that we expect a lot more from each other, mm-hmm. and how we. Yes, can I talk about? Okay. Let me talk about 4 things that I think are really important.
Okay, great.
Okay. So part of culture, right? And we were just kind of talking about this is like having good, productive, collaborative teams. Because again, if people feel good, whether it's like a place they're coming to work or like they just feel supported or, it's overall, it's a good environment or it's a good culture, right? Then you can just be more effective and you can be more collaborative and all of that. But there's 4 really key things. It's clarity, and kind of we talked about this a minute ago. Brands and companies need to really say, this is what our culture is. This is who we are. We're not going to apologize for it. This is who we are. So if you're one of us, come be with us. But you have to be really clear about that, right? The second thing is alignment. So looking for people that when you're really clear on what your culture is, then then you give people a chance to align with you. And that's what you want. You want people that are like, oh my God, I am all in on this culture, right?
Yeah.
And if anything, what we've decided is coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot more things that go into culture that matter to people, like a work culture, right? The third thing is accountability. People need to be accountable, not only to their boss or whatever, but to each other. And I think that goes with not only the work, but just, again, how people are treated in that and the mutual respect and the trust between teammates. And then the final thing is mindset. And, it kind of is all those things together, but this is really where your values come into play. So, being branding nerds that we are, we talk a lot about values and because that's a big part of a company's brand. But it's also a big part of your culture, quite honestly. And so, when you're thinking about what your culture is or what you want it to be, or like really getting clear on that, does that culture at the end of the day align with what you say your values are? Mm-hmm. And then do people know that? People should be able to understand and see your values in what your culture is. Mm-hmm. But, back to the original question, it's like, what does culture mean, or how has culture changed since the pandemic? I think that it's just more encompassing now. And because people are they're just being more intentional about life.
I think it's kind of what we said, like culture is now like, it's more real, it's more authentic rather than more like kind of the fake facade that it was when we were coming
Absolutely.
up, about pool tables and whatever, like, and about hanging out and whatever. Like you're trying to create like a real work-life balance for people where they can be happy and feel good and feel safe and like create something, like it's based on more real things than like all the kind of phony stuff of the early 2000s.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Liz. I know you have a meeting. Thank you so much for taking this time with me.
Oh, you're welcome.
I will see you in the office, I'm sure soon, doing a brainstorm, and I really
That's
do enjoy
right.
it. I think it's fantastic and fun, and I really do. It like always brightens my day when I get to come in. So,
Well,
thank
we
you
love
so
it.
much.
Well, this
Okay.
has been such a fun conversation. I feel like we also had some light bulb moments. So,
Oh my gosh, we're solving all the problems.
we are solving the world's problems,
Okay.
starting with culture, work culture.